Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the Do What Matters podcast, where we have really switched over to having great conversations with people from all walks of life who are really choosing to live from rest, not rush, which is one of the phrases I use all the time. And I'm really excited for our conversation today with some good friends of mine. I've known them for several years now, Phil and Lynn Brown. So welcome to the Browns to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome to be to spend some time with you, Teresa.
Yeah, we're
Thank
going to
you.
have a great conversation, and we're just going to dive right in because I don't want to waste a minute of like the time that you're listening in. I want you to hear what Phil and Lynn have to say and just kind of what some of their life experience has been. So I will just start though, Phil, with kind of you walking us through, and then Lynn, if you want to add anything. Just number one, where do you live? Kind of what's been some of your journey? What's your backstory a little bit? Because we always want to know what got you to here. So just give us the backstory, then we'll go to the front side.
Sure. So we are privileged to live on an island in the Bahamas, on the beach, and it's a place we've looked at for years. We vacationed here for years, taken our family here, and finally a dream come true. We laugh at this because it actually is we are answering a calling that we have felt for some time, and we've prayed about and had numerous people pray about. So some people actually have a calling to the Bahamas, just saying.
I give them a hard time about that. If you're listening in, like I haven't been called to the Bahamas, but they have been.
But so we've been here for a couple years. That journey actually started in Vermont, where we had lived for 30 years on a mountaintop in an old 18th century house that we actually moved. And so that's a journey unto itself. And, I married a beach girl. And so we lived, as Lynn would say, we lived on a mountaintop. And we vacationed on the beach. And one day, in her only Lynn prophetic style, said, I wonder if we should switch this up and live on the beach and vacation in the mountains. So that's kind of what's happened.
That's a story I haven't heard. So
yeah.
And I could add a little bit. It's so funny because Phil was a emergency room physician and this chief medical officer, right? And my dermatologist in Vermont told me before he retired, well, the sun and the ocean are the best cures for your psoriasis, which is what I used to go and sit in a box for 2 minutes with that sun. And I said, and she said, you got to talk to Phil about that.
I love it.
So there was a little
that you
arm
have
twist.
the best of both worlds in some ways.
We do. And there was a little arm twisting, but not much. I love the beach too. So yeah. Absolutely.
And we'll talk about it as we talk here and kind of go to the front side of life. But as Lynn said, you were an emergency room physician, served in a pretty fast-paced professional world for several years. And so let's start a little bit with the rush side of things. As you look back, because I know so many people can relate to your story of that rush phase where you're just kind of at a place where, okay, we've hit the wall and we have to do something different. And so kind of put us back there, both of you. What was going on maybe 15, 20 years ago that led you to think about what would it be like to be in the Bahamas? What would it be like in a different career? Where were you at?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we'd have to go back 30 plus years because we were living in Connecticut. I was in a busy ER program, and Lynn was working. You were working at University of Connecticut, right?
Yeah, I was. I for 20 years or so, I was an English second language teacher. So that's and we didn't have kids at that point.
So we were pursuing two busy careers. I mean, we were busy. And But after a while, that little sleepy town that we lived in Eastern Connecticut became a bedroom a community that was a commuting
Mm,
within commuting distance to Hartford, Connecticut, which is a busy metropolitan place. And when it got discovered, life got really, really busy. That town of 1,300 people became a town of
mm,
3,000 people in 5 years. And
Wow.
so naturally, we said our quiet, which we were used to in that
mm,
countryside, was taken away from us, we felt. So we
mm,
began to look elsewhere, a quieter place. And as it happened, and we won't go into this, but we found an old house, dismantled it. And then we looked for a place on a mountain to put that house in one of the most quiet, beautiful spots that we've ever seen. And in fact, we're told there's no place like this in Vermont.
mm,
So what happened was we got to Vermont, and guess what? As a Vermont friend of mine reminded me, he said, Phil, and I think he was just being nice the way he put it. He said, you think that you were looking for quiet here, and you were, but you brought
mm.
with you the lifestyle of
Yeah.
Connecticut. And I thought to myself, oops, that's deep.
Mm,
And so
Now,
we
that's a deep
began.
thought.
That was a deep
mm,
thought. And that was the beginning, I think, of really beginning to search who we are. And we began to actually, we learned how to practice to hear the voice of God on that
mm,
mountaintop. And he began to reflect. So that journey, that process began with him and
Mm,
of finding out, so who are we? Who's Lynn? Who's Phil?
mm.
Why are we as a couple? What
Yeah.
is this all about?
yeah.
And the journey, listen, a lot of what we have done, the going from point A to point B, from Vermont, from Connecticut to Vermont to the Bahamas, it's not been a straight
Mm.
line in any way. And in fact, it looked like the path of a bat trying
No.
to find his next morsel.
Yeah.
They follow the radar, and it's here, and then it's there, and it doesn't look like it has a lot of logic to it. But that
Mm,
was the journey that we had in God. So we began to we realized we were pretty messed up human beings, and our relationship as a couple was not working well.
Yeah.
mm,
And so
So, Lynn,
that took us.
during those times for you, as Phil's reflecting on, it's always interesting to reflect back and go, wow, where are we now and all of that. I know you were working full time as well, and then you moved to Vermont. And
yeah.
as Phil said, the dots are all over the place. But you made some changes because did you give up your career at that point in time and start staying
No,
home, or what was going on for you?
we moved up. We actually moved up to Littleton, New Hampshire, even though we bought our home in Tunbridge, Vermont. We bought the land. We didn't have our house up on it yet. It was a trailer. That's another long story. Um, but I was an ESL instructor at a private school in
Mm,
New Hampshire. And so that's why we moved. We were able, you were at the Littleton Hospital. I was, we moved up to New Hampshire first. And so, I was still working. I wasn't
okay.
stopping.
Yeah.
But then we decided that we couldn't have children. That was another story here, but I had had a miscarriage at that school.
Mm,
And so we decided we wanted to adopt. And so we went to Russia and adopted 2 kids, and they're they were 2 and 3.5, just about.
yeah. That's
Brought
one
them
of the
back to
things,
them.
my audience that listens in, or if they haven't listened in, that's one of the things that we have in common because we have two children
Mm,
who are also adopted, our son from here in the
mm,
States and our daughter from Romania at 2.5. So
mm,
we've talked about that in private and in public, that journey has a story all its own of adopting
right,
children and bringing that in. So that became part of the story during those years.
right.
And at this point in the story, as we look a little more current, um,
Mm,
children are grown, as mine are as well. And you're now making this decision a few years ago, and this is when our paths started to cross, of we have this idea of moving to the Bahamas. we've also done a lot of work. And Phil, you alluded to this when you were talking around our marriage.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we have really felt that the work that we want to do is helping other professionals that deal with
Yeah.
these seasons of life and these times. So I want you to tell us a little bit about the work you're doing now and that transition
Mm,
into that. And then we'll unpack that a little bit as well. But Phil, kind of tell us
mm,
about that spot where you said, not only do we need to make some changes, we're
Hmm.
we're doing this rush thing and it's really affecting our marriage. Because I think
mm.
the rush piece affects everybody in different ways. And for you, it really
Yeah.
showed up in your relationship and you had to do some work there. So explain the kind of journey you guys went on first, and then we'll talk about the journey you're taking others on.
Yeah.
Mm,
So I was coming to the end
mm,
of my professional career as a physician, and I knew that, and I felt like the Lord had given me a couple years heads up and said, "Listen, it's time to do. You're going to do something
mm,
different." Well, I don't know. I knew how I felt because I had no idea what was next.
Hmm.
We're Lynn and I are learners. We're lifelong
mhm,
learners, and I could not just sit in a rocking chair and look at the
mhm,
ocean or look at
No,
the
you could
mountains.
not. Neither one of you.
That's neither of us. And so I hired a coach to kind of walk me through. So, and I thought I knew who I was. The truth was, we had done some personality assessments as a couple. We had taken our
mm,
kids through them. They were not the Enneagram, but they were
mm,
other personality assessments. But I really, without that coaching engagement, I would have not arrived where I finally arrived, which was
mm,
I said, I love coaching. And it feels like this is the next step for me slash us because it's always a me slash us.
Why
Any
is it
decision I
always a
make.
me slash us? Tell me about what
Well,
got you there.
to be the me, we've always, I can answer that part too, but
Yeah.
we would go out and we had a lot of ministry, and then we did the training so we could come back. And for over 20 years, we helped in our church and at our home. We helped individuals, not couples necessarily,
Hmm.
but with physical healing, emotional healing. That's what we did. That was
Hmm.
our thing. And we always did it together, which was unusual. People said there weren't many couples doing that. It
Mm-hmm.
was individuals we saw in our. So we did that for 20. We still do it because we incorporate it now with our marriage coaching, but maybe you can.
Yeah, so it was we actually had a prophetic word in 1999.
Mm,
This is a guy who we'd never met before who said to us, "You
mm,
will not do work one without the other." And prophetic word is best when it confirms what the Holy
mm,
Spirit is already whispering to us. And he was whispering that to us even back then that we were called as a couple to
yeah.
do certain things.
Mm,
We didn't know what those certain things were at the time. So that's what. So when fast forward to life coaching, and we're starting to make the decision, I'm thinking, well, geez, I don't know where that fits you, Lynn, into
mm,
this we thing. But we need to keep that. And we prayed about it. And Lynn said, yeah, absolutely. I see your passion come alive. I see your eyes are bright again, and so on. And so I started life coaching.
mm,
Not too soon after that, PCCI, the Professional Christian Coaching Institute, where I got my training in life coaching, had
mm,
I think we were like a beta test for their first, I think it was their first marriage coaching program.
right.
Hmm.
And we were fortunate to study under the doers who are
Mm.
just awesome, awesome people. They ran the course and have
And they
become,
have management coaches as
yeah,
well.
What's
right.
that,
So,
Lynn? Say that
We
again,
are,
Lynn.
they are, the doers have helped us as mentors
Yes, they
as well.
become mentors. So I
right,
want to
right.
pause for just a second and then we'll come back to the story here because I don't want our listeners to miss a couple things. One
Oh,
is there's a thread in your story. You had someone speak into your lives early on and say, I see you guys doing work together. Then
mm,
you come along and say, um, when you're looking at this coaching, you go back to Lynn and say, can we do this together? And so that word alone is kind of this thread that starts to come even clear back as early as you were saying, like starting to move and looking at this house and putting it on the mountain together. And there's this thread of togetherness. I know though that those weren't always easy, and that both
Oh,
of you
no.
had to do your own work to get out of this rush mentality, this,
Mm,
individualness, and
Yes.
say, what does God have for us together in our
mm,
marriage? And that's not always easy to do.
Mm-mm.
mm,
So, practically speaking, before we get to the
mm,
work you're doing now, as you switched from physician work to coaching work, practically speaking, what are some things that you did in those early years that said, um, we can do this together? If we each do our own work, we can come
Yes.
together. What were the types of things besides personality work and things? What were actual things you were doing then? What were some obstacles, and then what were some solutions?
mm,
I think a lot of the beginning of that deep work was really, we went to a place called the Elijah
mm,
House a number of
Mm,
years ago because out of need, we had
mm,
it was very clear to us that as a couple, there were obstacles that got between us that had to do with our own emotional stuff. And
mm,
mm,
so we ended up going to the Elijah House for a 4-day intensive. And it was so powerful and so
yeah.
life changing. We walked out of there, and I'll never forget it. I
Mm,
mean, we had a lot of time to reflect on what was happening, both
mm,
individually and to us as a couple. And we realized, we said, other people would benefit from this. And
mm.
mm,
almost immediately, it was like, yes, we need to go and get this training.
So
So,
another
on
place that was confirming. So Lynn, how about for
absolutely.
you? Because what I hear Phil saying and what I want the listeners to not miss, because sometimes we
mm,
can go so fast through our story that the people are like, what did you do? What did you do? You took time to make it a priority.
Yes.
And Lynn, what was that like for you when you decide to go to this place and really do this 4-day intensive? Which I'm sure, at the time the kids may still be at home, you're still in a midst of thing, but you set aside this time. What was that experience like for you?
oh, it was life changing. I went out there for myself, of course, not just for us,
Yeah.
and I dealt with a lot of issues that I would go for prayer every week, and that was good, but it wasn't getting to the root of things, which is
Yes.
what we do as a couple with everybody that we help. Um, and so my experience was freedom. When
Mm.
I got out, there was a picture we took of each other, and I was glowing. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot
Wow.
describe. I came back a different person, and I said, I really want to help others like this, the way I got help and you got help.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so good. Because I
And
think what I would want people to hear is you get to choose. You get to choose to do it differently. You can keep doing the same old thing. You're going to get the
Oh
same
yeah,
old results, right? But you
yeah,
both took the time, and that was a jumping off point, not only to do your own work, but to do it
mm,
together. And then to say, and maybe God has for something for us to do here long term. So that begins a journey over the next
right.
few years of what's happening. So,
Right.
Phil, you had
and I,
something else there you wanted to
yeah, I
share.
want to add
Yeah.
one, yeah, I want to add one thing. So, true confessions here. When Lynn arranged that 4-day intensive in the Elijah House, I was thinking in my own head, well, Lynn needs this. I'm going along because it's the right thing to do as a husband. I don't think,
Mm,
but then we've completed the application, which was 8 pages long, very in
mm,
depth, really asking in depth. Who are you? What are your challenges? A lot of stuff. And honestly, within the first hour,
mm,
because we had the intensive, we would meet together with the prayer minister. And within the first hour, I realized that individually, I needed
mm,
this as much as Lynn ever needed it. And
Wow.
yeah.
that was the beginning of the alignment, to be honest
Well,
with you.
and
So
your
I,
transparency to say that is huge. because many things we enter into, um, we are like, oh, this is what somebody else needs, and we have on that knower, and you're part of our
Mhm.
program. You know this knower instead of learner mentality. We have on the
Yeah.
idea that, well, I know, and then God smacks us right upside the head and says,
You know,
oh, but right,
I mean,
and
I was a
so
physician. I knew everything, right? I was this
right,
arrogant, not very humble physician who thought that he was on a career ladder, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, the beauty of
Mm.
this all was, I got humbled in ways I had no idea would happen. So that's part of our journey as
Mm.
well. So,
well, let's fast forward a little bit because there's lots of stories and threads in between all of
Yeah.
that. But let's come to the present. And, you were in those places of rush, rush, rush. And you come to this part where you've gotten coach training, you've done all the things, you've made some lifestyle changes. You have
Mm.
purposely decided to live in the Bahamas. And we would all say that are listening, oh, lucky you. But it has come with its challenges too. And yet, that's where you're to be. And you're at this season now where together as a couple, you want to live into the work that you feel is yours to do. And so
yeah.
tell us about that work, what you're doing that feels you've made your own changes to rest, but now this is the work you want to help others do. What does that look like currently in what you're doing?
Hmm. Well, we've never been entrepreneurs or had our own business before. I think that's important to say. So we had to learn all that. We're still learning.
Oh, yeah.
So you worked for someone, I worked for someone, and I'm his employee. It's kind of funny.
In our
Yeah.
business. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows that, but so we had to choose. I remember that.
Yeah.
So
That's
we're
good business
learning, and
management right there.
It
um,
didn't come without a discussion. Let's just say
Oh,
so
that.
yeah.
we're a lot, and we're still learning, but we're I don't know if you want to talk about that tarp off.
So I think there are two words that come to mind when I think about where we are now
Mm.
and what we're leaning into. One of them is legacy.
Mm,
So as Teresa, we have all talked about this. We're in a stage in our life where it became quite clear to us that we have limited time on this earth, and this is not a negative thing. It just is. I mean, eventually we'll go to eternity, which will be a life that probably makes this life on the beach pale by comparison. But
Mm.
we legacy is important to us. Fruitfulness is important to us. And the scripture, I think it's in Matthew 13, where Jesus is talking about, it's the parable of the seed. And he says that the seed that is placed in good soil is going to
Mm.
bear fruit 100-fold, 60-fold, or at least 30-fold. And that scripture hit us very hard, probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, because it made us think, whoa, whoa, whoa. We as a couple could only coach probably 35 couples in a year. Okay. That's the impact that we have. That's the influence that we have. But then we began to think about, whoa, how about this? What is this 100-fold, 30-fold, 60-fold fruitfulness look like? And we began to pray about it. And to be honest with you, we've
Mm.
had people say this to us. Um, what if we were to do marriage coaching and training and then
Mm.
basically coach and train couples who are like-minded, who have the same passion for marriage that we do, in what we do, because we have a program that's very, very different and has a lot of tools. The tool bag is different than tool bags or marriage coaching that we've seen. And so legacy for us is getting to that point. We're not there yet. I mean,
Mm.
honestly, we're still, we want to increase our clientele. We want to have more clients, more experience, and so on. But we
Mm.
can, we realize that we're not too far off from thinking that way in terms of
that's
fruitfulness. That
so
is to
good.
train other people to have
Mm.
so that they can hit 30 or 40 clients. And, if you're training 20 people, you can do the
Mm,
math. You have a lot more influence. So
mm,
legacy is really important for us. But you know what? God wired us, and I'm just going to say this. We're part of the Enneagram Harmony Triad of 1, 4, 7.
mm.
Lynn's a 4, I'm a 1, and we are both 7s.
Yeah.
We are actually both 1, 4, 7s. And I remember the time that you kind of challenged us early in our introduction to you when you were
Hmm.
walking us
I
through the
remember.
Enneagram at the pool. And you asked a question to both of us. You say,
Mm,
so Len, you're a 4, Phil, you're a 1. What are you missing in the harmony triad? Which of these do you want to lean into more? And we looked at each other. We said,
mm.
7. We need to
Definitely.
lean into our 7 because we have been so much about the business and about the busy, 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 and do, and so on and so forth. But yet, we know there's a being part of this that we need to go back to, that needs to drive us. And so we said adventure is that one, and
Mm,
it's so much a part of the 7. And we
mm.
realized that now in this day, adventure is who we've been all along. And so
It
we are
has
now
been.
leaning
It's
into
been
that
so
adventure.
fun to watch you all, and we've known each other probably 3 or 4 years now, to watch you as a couple in this season of life experience adventure. I've watched you travel to Europe. I've watched you move to the Bahamas, but you're still doing work, but you're doing it in adventuresome ways. And you're creating experiences and feeding your soul, your being in these adventures. And that's not the season of it, also is part of the season of life that you're in, that you have some freedom to do that. Um, but it's been a
Mm.
beautiful thing to see. I love the legacy piece. Lynn, um, tell us a little bit about what that legacy means for you as you think about helping couples currently, and then eventually maybe training others to do the work that you do. What's that been like building that?
It's well, I was going to say we've also been passionate about in the past, and still are about missions and mission trips and healing, and that's been my whole heart before I ever got involved with coaching
Mm-hmm.
myself. And so that legacy I want to see continue is being able to pray for prayer is part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited because to see couples that we've helped through the years before we ever coached, we helped in marriage in our church. I've been excited to hear people say, well, in our church there's nobody, no mentors for marriage, no for pre-marriage or anything. Even in bigger churches in big cities, I was surprised. So they really said, "Oh, you've got my back," and I felt like we're able to help people that way. And that's what I want to do. I want to see marriages, if they're going to get married or if they are married, that they stay together and they get closer and work things out and get healed. I guess that's healing is my passion. So
Mm.
Well, and as you think
I
about
like
legacy, what does it, when you work with a couple, there's so many ways that
yeah,
this legacy piece plays out. It's you training others. But if you work with a couple that stays together, either through
yeah,
premarital, whatever, what are they passing on to their children as the example
yeah,
of marriage and
yeah,
what a strong marriage looks like? There's another legacy thread there that comes
yeah,
through.
that's it.
Tell us
Yeah.
about the uniqueness, because I do think it's unique in the work that you all do and the way that you work with couples. If I recall, and Phil, you can kind of talk about this more, but you kind of have this 12-week kind of 12-step program that you work through with couples, which has some unique tools in it that are a part of your story, things you learned back in the rush days that helped you. But just walk us through maybe just a couple of those, and what makes them unique and really stick within a couple's the work they do in their marriage.
Yeah, so I mean, what we've done is we have not really created anything but a program using a variety of tools in our tool bag that we've accumulated, as you referred to.
Mm,
And so that tool bag has overtly Christian tools. that we gained through the Elijah House and Christian Healing Ministries and a variety of and a number of other ministries we've been trained in, and they are overtly they are designed to help. I mean, our whole shtick with couples is illustrated in a triangle. The triangle is me, Lynn, and God. And and each of those lines to God and to each other represents that relationship. The tighter that triangle, the closer the relationship, the more successful our marriage will be. And that's just, most of that is actually very scientific. So in order to do that, we realize that the tool bag includes Christian tools. They're overtly Christian. There are overtly secular tools, although they have a Christian application to them. And those tools we've borrowed from people like John Gottman, who is ostensibly probably the premier researcher in marriage in the world. And then we borrow tools that we gained from the real life process. And so, and we've added a couple other tools in there. All of this designed, once again, within 12 weeks, is designed to do basically two things: to bring a couple closer to one another in what we call deep, intimate friendship. Because, as John Gottman said, all successful marriages have deep, intimate friendship as a characteristic, all of them. And you don't get that deep, intimate relationship with one another or friendship unless you really know each other. Who are you? Who are you wired to be? What is your personality? What are your desires? What's your dreams? What are your needs, your values, all of those things? But the other tools, once again, that we borrowed from the real life process, the needs and values, those are so powerful and so key for us. And then the Enneagram stuff. I mean, we absolutely love the Enneagram. So in a 12-week program, we put together all of those tools, and with the goal of helping the couple draw close to one another in deep, intimate friendship,
So
and
clear.
draw closer to God, and to draw closer to God. And it seems to work very well. We see great results. We're excited about it because, to be honest with you, we didn't have to create any of these tools.
Well, and I love that you are giving the couple tools, right? So the
Yes.
best thing, that's
Yes.
another legacy piece. The best thing that you can do is have tools in your tool belt. I don't care what it is, because the storms are going to come. The hard
Yes.
parts are going to come. They're still going to come to you. They're still going to come to me. But if I have a way to grab a tool, so you're
Yes.
leaving couples after 12 weeks with some resources and some tools that they can use and that they can go back to. I think some of the best things we can do for someone else is to not make them dependent upon us, but to actually help to create in them their own systems and processes and ways that they relate to one another, relate to themselves, and relate to God. So I love that you've created this little tool chest of things that you're giving to people as a gift in the work that you're doing. And these are all things you all have experienced yourself. Lynn, if you had to name one of the things that you do in this 12-week program, what would it be for you? What's your favorite thing where you just see couples light up and do? Phil's mentioned a few, but what's one for you?
It's funny. I was just thinking of this because every time we've done, and I think it's the John Gottman tool, where the affection,
Fondness and affection.
fondness and affection. When they have to think of something that they really are fond or about they could be like almost like mad at each other or something. But when I remember one person, the list was this long, and she read it out loud to him, and he's like,
The things
"Oh."
that she was fond and had great affection for
For
him.
him, and vice versa. Even when they're in the midst of some kind of conflict, it just brings them together, and they just their faces light up. It
Because
just is positive.
I've been married
positive.
42 years, and you don't sit around all the time saying, I am so fond of you for this, this,
Yeah,
this, and this, right?
yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
just don't do that work. And so
Yes.
I love, and I have to say too, because I know you two both pretty well, this 147 thing. Like Lynn is all this heart stuff, right? And all she loves bringing out that in people. And I think that's what makes you unique as a couple, even as you work with other couples. They see in you both mirror that differences and yet oneness that you bring in
Mm,
friendship and love, love for God, and just your differences. You know, we laugh about it all the time as we've worked together. Phil's like, get it done, give me a plan, do all this. And Lynn's like,
Yeah.
oh, but could we have some connection? But yet the tool, Lynn, that you said was fun. There's that 7 showing up. Like
Yeah.
just dreaming
mm,
and creating a space for
yeah.
couples to dream together about what they would love to do together and how they love to spend time and all those things. And I know you guys bring that out so well in the work that you do. And so we want to talk about what you're doing right now. What's available for people? You've taken your own journey to get here through New Hampshire and Vermont and jobs and careers and all of that. Um, what is it that you're doing currently right now? Where can people find you? All of that kind of thing. And then I have one final question. So
You
tell
bet.
us all the
You bet.
bells and whistles of where you're at, what you're doing, and what's available, and all of those things.
So we already described the 12-week program that we offer, and so that's the current offer that we have. We can be found where? Where can we be found?
We are on LinkedIn and we have Facebook accounts, but we're still kind of learning about YouTube and things like that. So
All the other bells and whistles.
we haven't,
Yeah.
done that totally yet. But we have a website that we're going to be fine tuning and
All of that.
um,
I'd say LinkedIn is kind of the place that you guys been hanging out.
It is. Yes.
we have been
Videos in
going.
Yeah.
different places. Both of you have
Yes.
accounts there. Phil has an account, Lynn has an account, and you'll see their content and all their things there on LinkedIn. Be able to
Right.
see them in action. They do
Yep.
some really cute, fun videos that also just are just little learning moments that I think are really unique. So that's the best way. And Phil, I know we'll have all this in the show notes too. We'll have Phil's email address that you can connect with them there. If you
Yeah.
just want to send them a direct email and say, hey, what's it look like to work with you all? I think too, probably here in a few weeks, you'll have another free workshop webinar coming up. Where will that be, Phil? How could they find out about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So we'll be sending. You can go on LinkedIn,
Mm,
and we'll have an announcement for the August workshop. We're doing a
Awesome.
series of workshops that really they reflect kind of the work that you would do if you worked with us for 12 weeks. You're getting something that is practical, something you can do with your spouse or your
mm,
partner, and you can learn to do it and start right then and there after the workshop. It's something that's very practical. So the next
Awesome.
one is going to be it's going to be August 22nd,
Okay.
and LinkedIn is the place to go for that. And then we'll be doing one in September, and I don't know the date yet, but it's
That's
like the
okay.
second or third week
So
of September.
make sure
Yeah.
that you get on their email list or that you're following them on LinkedIn so that you find out all these things and find out when those things are coming up. Because if you're listening to this past an August date, you'll know there's one coming in September. If you're listening to this past September, just make sure you connect through the show notes that we have available for this podcast episode. Um,
Yeah. Those
so
are,
much
those are
fun.
free.
So much we could talk about. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, those are free workshops.
Yeah,
So if you
absolutely
just
free.
register for the workshop, then,
mm,
and in fact, you will receive the recording of the
mm.
workshop if you register for the workshop.
That's
So,
good to know. Good to know.
yeah.
So I have one final question for both of you, and we'll start with Lynn. So one of the things I always think listeners enjoy is going, uh, so how did they make this switch? Yes, they made the switch from, rush back to rest, but how do they live that out in their everyday life? So in the last week or so, Lynn, where has there come a place where you had to make a choice of, gosh, I could go do this and I could be all busy doing this, or I could do all
Mm.
this, but instead I'm going to choose this? What's something that you can think of where you just kept yourself grounded in that place?
Well, I can think of two things, but one is every day we make sure that we usually have to do low tide beach walks, they're called, because otherwise you're sinking in the sand.
Yeah,
So we make sure we have a border collie dog, and she loves to run and chase the balls, and we'll need to swim and we need to walk. So we do a good hour, and it just relaxes
oh,
both
that's
of
so
us.
good.
And it's something we do every day, no matter what. The other part is your R for relationship. I was thinking about that,
Hmm.
that I've really been, you know, here making new relationships, making sure that I get out of the four and I be the one to get a hold of people, which I'm doing. So and that's something I'm very learning and getting a lot better, but that's important,
I love it.
to
So
getting the
leaning
R.
into those rhythms of just like every day we're walking, but knowing how you're wired and designed, that you have to go
Yeah.
seek out others to have relationships with. Uh,
Yeah.
Not just because, let's be real practical about this. You know, sometimes in a marriage we expect our husband or our wife to be the one that
Mhm.
fills all those needs, right?
Right.
And you're making the conscious choice to
Mm.
say, no, I need other relationships too. Especially, you've only lived there, what, a couple of years now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome, Lynn.
And
Thanks for sharing
And
that.
I also, I'll just say the relationship, I keep in touch with the friends back home through Zoom, a prayer group I started, and I've been intentional to do that. So that's
Oh,
important to
that's
me.
good. That's good. How about you, for you,
So,
Phil, when you think of in the last week or so, what are some choices you've made to stay in a place of rest, not rush?
Well, and this has been, there's a journey to this, but I've made the decision that we're in
mm,
a second world country
Hmm.
and things happen slowly. And there is this thing called island life. And you can either fight it or you can go with the flow to a point. There's certain things that I don't accept in island life. But to be honest with
mm,
you, I could drive myself as a planner, as a go, get her done kind of person.
mm,
I could drive myself crazy. And I've done that. And I've
mm,
realized in the last few weeks that, you know what? I'm going to live. I'm going to do what a good pastor friend of mine told us to do a few years ago. He said, and it's so simple, and we all know it, but I have to remind myself, and it's a breath prayer for me.
mm.
It's do what you can do and what you know God asked you to do, and He will do the
The
rest.
rest.
Oh, there you
REST.
go.
And so I've
Yeah.
realized
That's
that I
perfect.
can rest in that. I can rest in that. And that's a tough one for me. I'm such a
Hmm.
Mm,
doer.
You are.
I've been such a doer for so long. So that kind of action and that breath prayer is new.
mm,
Oh, that's so good. And it really does kind of wrap up our conversation today of this idea of doing life together and through all
mm,
the seasons and all the places. But what I respect so much about the two of you is you're still working at doing that. And even though the work now is helping others, you're still living it each and every day. And you're still living
mm,
it out. And, even as you talked about that, Phil, of like, I'm going to live into the island life. I always wrap up every podcast by saying that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment.
mm.
You just have to
Right.
look for them. And you all have
Yeah.
chosen to go to a second world country, as you said, and enjoy the moments and live into this fun, adventuresome side of self. And it's just a blessing to know you, to be friends with both of you. I can't wait to come visit. It's on our
Yeah.
bucket list.
Motel
And
6.
we cannot wait.
All right.
So we will be down to the island life and help you fulfill that living out of those walks and all those things. But thank you for being my guest here today. It has been great to be with you, and even just to enjoy looking at your scenery. Y'all can't see it because you're listening, but just they represent the island life. So thank you, Phil. Thank you, Lynn, for being on the Do What Matters podcast.
Thank you so much. We had a great time,
Yeah,
as always.
definitely. Mhm.
Yeah.